pears in this technique video together because you cut them very similarly. I just want to mention a couple tips about picking one that's useful for your intended purpose. Of course, there's many different varieties and textures of apples and pears. They could be soft to very crisp. Apples definitely have more of a range of tartness. They can be very sweet to very tart and everywhere in between. Pears tend to be more along, sweet versus less sweet and flavorful versus less flavorful, but not usually too much tartness. And they can come in many colors, and I just have a couple different ones here. These are both quite crisp, but if you were, say, making a dessert where you wanted some sweetness from the apple, but you also wanted distinct pieces of apple, like we do in our apple crisp recipe in the dessert class, then it's nice to use a mix of apples. So I might use some of these crisp red apples along with some Granny Smith apples, and even the crispest red apples tend to break down more than the Granny Smith in a recipe. You could also get some of the softer ones, like a Gala apple that's not going to maintain as much crispness. That will melt even further into more of a sauce that will surround those nice distinct slices of Granny Smith apple. And I find that you always get more complexity of flavor if you have a mix of tart and sweet. So if you don't have a moderately tart and sweet apple, it's nice to mix them together. For pears, oftentimes people are having them raw, or you might be poaching them. If you're poaching them in a syrup of some type for a dessert, then you want to start with a fairly firm pear, otherwise it will fall apart. And if you're slicing it for eating, then whatever you prefer, the creamy, juicy, just kind of dissolve in your mouth ones, or nice and crisp, kind of more like an apple. Whether you peel them or not is also your preference. You can certainly make desserts with the peel on. If they're apples that tend to break down, though, it can have this like unpleasant skin in there that isn't, clinging to a nice slice of apple. So in that case, it is nice to peel the apples or pears. If you have non-organic varieties, then a lot of the pesticides and other residues are on the outside. If they're waxed, certainly take the peel off. But if they're fresh, organic, crisp, whatnot, then there's actually a lot of good nutrition right under the skin, especially the apples, that you'll lose with peeling it. So fresh and organic, by all means, keep that skin on and enjoy all the nutritional benefits. But a lot of people get hung up on how you get that core out if you want to use this for something or you want to slice it up. You can obviously buy an apple corer, which is a little device that will just kind of pop in there, pull the core out. You really only need to do that if you want your apple to otherwise stay whole. So if you want to do baked apples where you don't want to be monkeying around in there with your paring knife trying to get that out without slicing through and cutting yourself, then if you do a lot of baked apples, you might want to get a tool to core apples or pears. But otherwise, if you're going to slice them up, I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. I'll peel my apple, I'll leave my pear whole, just since we do these in both baking classes and to eat raw. So you can just use a standard peeler or a paring knife if you want. You can peel it this way, or if you actually didn't peel it like this and you just started this way, you can actually make one long twisty piece of apple peel, which is really kind of fun, especially when you have kids. They can play with it in the kitchen. But however you accomplish peeling it is fine. You can peel it toward you like I'm doing, which is how I'm used to doing it with paring knife, or you can peel away from you. Whatever way you feel like you have control and you're not going to slip and cut yourself. If you're doing it with a paring knife, you definitely want to cut away from you. So the first thing you want to do is just cut down through the core. And then you can see, you have the core of the apple there. And then put the flat side down and cut it into quarters, cutting through the core again. And then what you can do is you can either put it flat on the cutting board and take your chef's knife and cut at an angle like this. It does cause you to waste a little bit. You might have to get in there and trim it up if you don't take a big chunk out of your apple. There you go. So you've cored your apple that way. The other thing that you can do is you can kind of prop it up on the end and take your paring knife, kind of go in there and follow the contours of the apple. Go halfway through and then do the same thing going down again. And then you can always, trim that up if you need to get any little bits out. The quick way, if you're doing a lot of apples for a baked good, I highly recommend just doing it with your chef's knife like this. It's super quick and your fingers are always out of the way. As long as they're up on top of the apple and you're cutting down, they're not where you can cut yourself. Okay, so we have our apple there. If you wanted it sliced, say for the apple crisp, then you can go ahead and just put the flat side, which will be there now that you've cut out the core, down on the board. Just make some nice slices. If you you want it cubed up, you can also go ahead and stack some of these slices, and if you wanted it, you wanted to make something that was more of a like filling for an empanada, or something that you could put a small amount in a dessert, then you might want little small pieces. If you wanted a really rustic apple crisp, you might cut much bigger pieces, leave them 3/4 of an inch or an inch in size, bigger pieces like that. The thicker and bigger the pieces are, the longer it's going to take to cook. So, if you make an apple crisp with this size pieces, it will cook very quickly. Your filling might finish even before your crisp does on the top. This is what I like to use. You get a nice balance between your crust cooking, or your topping cooking, and the apples getting done. And then this, if you did a crisp where you had nuts or other things that would tend to burn on top of it, you're probably going to burn them before you're going to get these apples cooked, unless you cook it at a really low temperature for a long time. So just use your thoughts about whatever you're going to make, about what size it should be. If you want a nice nutritious snack, having nut butter on a piece of apple is a great way to balance fat, fiber, and protein. Have nice, even blood sugars, even if you're having fruit in your diet. And then for our pear, we're just going to, let's say we just want to eat this, but we just want to get that core out. Maybe we want to have it with a cheese platter, or other treats. Pears are nice because they can go with savory or sweet, which is really nice. There. We're just cutting down through the core again, quartering it just like we did the apple. There's a little bit more curviness, and so if you did try to do the trick with the chef's knife where you went in there to cut out the core, you're going to lose a lot of the pear. So this time it is nice to use your paring knife, just making sure to keep your fingers out of the way of your knife. Follow the contour of that core, cutting away from yourself as you can. Cutting toward the cutting board is always a nice bet, because if you slip, you hit your board. So there is cored pear. And actually it's just this, this part is mostly what you're trying to get out. You're just trying to get the fibrous chewy bits out. Sometimes you'll have, here we go. So you can see this line going up from the core of the pear. You definitely want to get that out, so that you would cut all the way down. But if, it's mostly on this piece and it's not at all here, then you just have to cut out that little partial circle there to get the core out. So for here, cut away from ourselves. Let's see. That would be good. You just pop that out. And then here, where we have the longer piece there, we want to cut. Get all of that out. So there is our pear. And again, you can slice it just like your apple. Similar to where we had the peppers, where you have the shiny side versus the side that started in the middle, it's always going to be easier and less likely to slip if you cut the part that was in the middle versus cutting the shiny outer part. See, a lot of these techniques are going to apply even if you're making things that are, from a totally different family, a totally different type of food. A lot of times, it's the actual texture and type of food you're cutting that dictates the cutting technique, but other times it's actually partly the shape. So, there you go. Some nice pear slices. You could also, the other shape that I didn't show you with the apples that you could do here, pile up your little stack of sliced pears, and you can cut some little rustic cubes as well. So that's another way that you can have it. If you're going to make a fruit salad where you want it to be more of a chopped salad where you have lots of pieces of chopped up fruit, maybe like an orange or other citrus based dressing, then this is a nice size, because you can get a piece on your fork, get it in your mouth without it dripping and slopping all over. So we have our apples and pears chopped up a variety of ways you can use for fresh or cooked preparations.